Welcome back to the show. Today we were talking with Emma Westbrook, and I'm so excited to learn more about Emma's story and talk all about Emma's witchcraft journey. So let's just dive right in and take it over to Emma. Would you like to talk a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, kind of before we hop into your story?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm a fan of your podcast and all the things you do. So I'm truly honored to be here. I'm Emma. I am a psychic witch. I have been practicing for just about 10 years. I'm a tarot reader, a magical mentor. You may know me by Weaving Witch on Instagram. Um, And yeah, I am just a person that loves magic and loves living a magical lifestyle and is really passionate about sharing that with other people and helping other people live their own version of their most magical life.
I love that. That's awesome. And I think that that's very needed. And I love your emphasis on helping people kind of see and live, like you said, like their own magical life. I find that that's something that I like to, like, I really like to focus on that too, because I just think it's so useful logistically for really any witch to be like, yeah, like kind of, it's really helpful to get assistance in developing your own personal practice. So I'm really excited to talk about your personal practice and like, I don't know if anything that you do is sort of in relation to how you came into your magical practice. Maybe even before we like hop into like your earliest like magical origin, do you feel like the way that you teach is sort of reflected by how you came into your practice, or maybe even how you wish you came into your practice?
Totally. I feel like that's like part of that's like the whole reason that I do teach and do connect with other witches is because I started like so solo, just looking at books, no community, and you know, I had some great resources like as far as books go, but there's not a lot of nuance in books,
Mm,
and especially at the time in which I was kind of coming into my magic, there was definitely like a layer of like more modern witch stuff, which was cool, but it just felt so this is how you do it, like do this.
yeah.
And that's not what how I practice now or like what I believe in. And it's all I felt like it was all so beginner. And so it got to a certain point where I felt like, okay, like I followed the steps and now like where does it deepen? And I think that that's something that you can't always find in a book. You need experience and conversation and community to find that. So I definitely try to create a creative magical space for me and my clients, definitely.
I love that. Yeah, I know. It's so funny to me sometimes with like the book, the books, because it's like on one hand, I understand why a lot of it's very beginner focused. I think that when it comes
Mhm.
to writing nonfiction, that's like a focus. But yeah, it is sometimes frustrating as somebody who is developing their magic. So that's awesome that that yeah, that kind of like led you into that. So tell me a little bit about, your earliest magical origins. What kind of inspired you in childhood or maybe even like later on? Were you the kind of kid that was like, seeing ghosts and prancing in the forest with fairies or that sort of thing? Where did you grow up? I'm also curious about that.
I grew up in New York on Long Island, and so it's kind of like a suburban area of New York, about like an hour and a half outside New York City. Um, I feel like I have always, I mean, I think so many people who come to witchcraft later in life feel this way of like, I've always been a witch. Like the earliest that I look back, I was doing such witchy stuff. I was totally playing with the fairies in the garden. I was making potions, with the flowers. I had like this room when I was little that my mom like sponge painted, and I had these little fairy decals like all over it. Like my childhood witchcraft was very like fae focused.
Mm.
And like my earliest memory, although like talking to spirits is not really a part of my practice, but like my earliest memory from being like 1 years old is like talking to my grandpa's ghost. um,
Wow.
and yeah, like I remember just being a little kid and like loving the Wizard of Oz, like loving all things witch. And like it's funny, I remember like using the word witch so early in my vocabulary, and it's like how did I even know what that meant at like 5 years old, you know? But I just like knew what it meant. And it's always been like, I feel like especially now that when there is so much more room for nuance, like people have different choices of words, but which has always been and will always be my word of choice.
I love
But
that.
yeah, I feel like I really did start off as a kid just being super magical. Um, but then obviously I have a beginning to like my practice seriously.
For sure. Awesome. What was like the religious background of your family?
So I grew up going to Lutheran church. My mom was like, at the time in which I was growing up, my mom was kind of having like a crisis of faith. Like she grew up Catholic and then she was like, I don't know, it doesn't resonate. Let me try Lutheran. And she still like believed in God when I was a kid, but she didn't go to church with me. And my dad's just like strict science dude, like no spirituality. And I remember going to like they made me go to church with my cousin and like my cousins, like my aunt and my uncle. And so I would go every Sunday to like Sunday school, and I had to make my communion, which when you grow up Lutheran, it's like a little bit older than just like yeah, it's just a little bit older than like other sects of Catholicism. And
Yeah, I
so,
remember doing it in the first grade. So I was like, what? Like I just turned like 9 or 10,
yeah,
maybe?
I think I was like fifth grade. So it's definitely like a
Yeah.
bigger jump.
Maybe I was younger. Yeah, I definitely would know because first grade is way younger. Yeah, so go on.
Well,
Yeah.
it's possible because like
Yeah.
I don't know, like it's yeah, you're super young. And that was something that my mom did like about the Lutheran church. Is she's like, "Oh, I feel like you like understand it a little more if you're like a little older." So after I made my communion, they were kind of like, "Okay, if you want to stop going, you can stop going." And I was like obsessed with God. Like when I was a kid, like I just was like not in the sense of like obsessed with like God, like oh my God, I love Jesus, but just like I was constantly asking these questions that like my mom couldn't answer. Like I was just very existential as a child, like being like, if God made us, who made God? And she couldn't answer me. And I thought like as a child that she just like wasn't telling me. So I was always just like asking these questions and like thinking about the afterlife, like as like a little kid, like probably more than I do now. So I'd always been drawn to spirituality. And when I like came to the realization that like, oh, when I go to Sunday school, I'm supposed to believe the things that they're telling me, like as if they happened. There was like this huge disconnect of like, okay, this is not what I believe, but I believe in something. And so I kind of went on this like journey to like find a religion for myself. And
I
I
love
like
it.
remember like being like 10 years old, like Googling like what are the different religions that you can study, and like just like having like a long period of time searching for something that resonated until I found Wicca is where I started.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, I feel like I'm resonating with a lot of what you're saying. Like I feel
Mhm.
like I remember being really young and being like I never really like I was kind of not interested in God, but at least like Catholic God, but I was like I found myself being really fascinated by religion and being really fascinated by other religions and like what's going on over here and like what's happening here. Catholicism, I was like snooze fest. Apparently, I don't know, but even though it's I like nowadays I'm kind of like a folk witch, so I'm like ooh, there's like certain things that I like about it now. But anyway, so yeah, I really resonate with that. That's so cool. So you started your your first kind of like witchcraft I don't know, like your journey into witchcraft through Wicca. Do you
Mhm.
remember what I mean, I know that Wicca is very like widely like there's a lot of like Wicca books. I feel like when you talk about witchcraft to people who don't really know much about witchcraft, Wicca is like the first question of like, oh, are you talking about Wicca? Like what's is that what it is? So I can imagine that maybe it was like the first thing that you got introduced to, but do you remember kind of like what happened, what that process looked like?
Totally. So it happened around the same time. I was about like 16, 17, and I was watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer for the first time. And so Willow has her like journey into witchcraft and into Wicca. And so kind of at the same time, like I don't remember what happened first, if like I started, if it like came into like my just like understanding or knowing, or if it came from the show. I think it did come from the show, honestly, but I was like, what is this? Like people think they're like witches for real. Like, what is this? And so I just started like researching it. And the very first witchcraft book I had was Buckland's Guide to Wicca. And it's like this, maybe you're familiar with it. I'm sure you are. It's like a work
Yes.
for coven work. And so like it didn't resonate with me at all. Like it wasn't something I could do, which I feel like, I go back and forth of being like, it kind of was cool because it gave me this opportunity to like explore this from like the perspective of like looking at it without applying it to myself and like kind of like observing it.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't, and I think part of that was because it wasn't written for something to connect to me. Like it was just like this thing I was like researching and I was like, this is interesting. And then like the more that they talked about kind of like ideology, the more I felt connected to it. And I was like, okay, I feel like there is more here that I want to look into. And then I started to get some more books that like resonated for like a solitary practitioner and like a young teenage girl and not like a group of men in a coven.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I love that. Yeah, that's amazing. Awesome. So when so was this like teenage years
Yeah,
approximately,
like
would you say?
16, 17.
Yeah, I love that. Um in terms of like when you think about that era of your witchcraft practice, was there any like do you remember like anything vivid from that? Like any spell that you did or any ritual or maybe like starting to celebrate any pagan holidays? Like what were the more vivid memories from the teen witch era? I feel like it's an important era.
For sure. I have some really fun memories from that era. So something that I feel like paints like the picture of like me doing my witchcraft in my room is like my parents hate like any smells, like perfume, candles, incense, like even an unscented candle, they'd be like, you're not allowed to burn it. So I was like doing these spells with like unscented tea lights, like while my mom was at the grocery store and like making sure to like blow it out before she comes in the house. Not for the fear of like being caught of practicing witchcraft, but for the fear of like burning candles where I'm like not allowed to. And so I remember like on my floor of my bedroom, like doing like this spell where I like took herbs from like my kitchen cabinet and it was like a love spell. I feel like a lot of young teen witches can relate to your first spell being a love spell. But yeah, it was like a love spell on this guy I was dating at the time for him to like text me back because we were like in a fight or something. And then I remember like blowing out the candles and looking at my phone, and he texted me like in that moment that I blew out the candles. And I just was like, holy shit, this is real. And it was just like the best feeling. Like, oh my God, like I can't believe that fucking works. Like, what the fuck?
Oh, I love that. That's so funny. That's so funny. You like jogged a memory in me of doing something very similar because it was not a candle spell, but it was like to get somebody to like contact you or text you back, and I completely forgot that this happened, and I'm just like getting this jogged memory. That's so funny. We're all like trying to figure it out, trying to get the
I love
people to
that.
text us back.
Do you remember
Um,
using cinnamon in your spell?
if cinnamon was in it, I remember it was like on a playing card. Like I remember it was
Mm,
like I took the playing card of the person, like like I took like maybe like
yeah.
their sun sign or their I don't think at the time I knew anything about rising signs. And then I, was like, oh, King of Pentacles or whoever, or I don't know, probably like Knight or Jack, realistically. It's like a teenage boy.
Yeah.
And then I was like, text me back. Like, and I was writing on it, which is so funny because I feel like I do a lot of like magic with playing cards and magic with tarot. So it's like very
Yeah.
strange that that was the teen witch spell that I was doing in regards to that. But you said yours involves cinnamon.
It was like pretty much just like cinnamon on a tea light. Like that was it.
I love that.
And honestly, like I still do that too. It's really funny. Like I am such a big candle witch. I mean, I'm a triple fire, so candle magic is just
Mm.
so natural for me. And I love cinnamon in spells because it's just like it was one of the first herbs that I used and something that I feel like really helps me connect to like mundane magic too. It's like something I'm always using for another reason anyway. So why not put a spell in it?
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Yeah, I know you were talking a little bit about kitchen magic being something that's really part of your practice, at least, like kind of like bringing your, like you said, bring like the magic into the mundane.
Mhm.
Yeah, like tell me a little bit more about um how you how you have kind of structured your practice now, because I feel like um talking to you and like kind of just knowing a little bit about your practice, I feel like y- I don't know, I feel like you have a really like awesome way that you make your everyday life really magical, and I think it's inspiring. So I'm curious about like
Aw,
how
thank
that kind of
you.
came to be.
I don't really remember exactly when I started kind of like this thought process of like bringing magic into the everyday. I think it really happened naturally. And then when I started teaching, I like that's kind of the words that I found to describe what I was doing. But I feel like pretty much like when I moved into like my own space, like out of my parents' house, out of a dorm, even like still living with roommates, but just like having my own room and like having the ability to like set up a full altar, I feel like my practice really like started to like take shape in a different way. And I think from that point on, it just became a part of my life. And for a long time living with roommates, my altar was just like in my bedroom. And so it was like I would wake up, I would see it, I would light my candles, I would stand there. Like it was like a part of my just physical space. And so it just became so natural. And then I think as things evolved, I did start weaving magic into just kind of normal acts just because I was just always wanting to be in that space and always wanting to connect to that feeling. And at a certain point, it just became what I do and like so natural, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that so much. Um, yeah, I remember too, like being having a altar in my bedroom, and yeah, I feel like that was it was obviously like teenage witch era, and it was like I felt the same way. Like I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just like right there, just
Yeah.
going over, I'm doing it. So I guess as we kind of come out of chronologically like your teen witch era,
Mhm.
um I guess the last question kind of in that is like, were you influenced by media at all as a as a teen witch, or even like later on? Was that sort of like, whether it be like witchcraft in movies, books, etc., or were you just sort of like, I know talking about the fact that you're learning a lot about witchcraft through books and kind of applying it, do you feel like the media had any impact on how you viewed your practice at that time?
It's interesting. I feel like not really. I mean, although, other than this experience of like watching Buffy and like seeing Willow kind of like come into her magic, that definitely affected me for sure. But I think other than that, like I never really watched like, all the classic like witchy movies like The Craft. Like I didn't watch that till kind of later, like till I was already a witch. So it like didn't really affect me in that way. And I think like I guess I will say, like, before I started, like, really coming into my practice, like, I grew up watching The Wizard of Oz, which I think I mentioned already. But there's definitely this, like, good witch, bad witch kind of vibe that I feel like was in my subconscious. Um, and I think that that was definitely like something that I felt come up when I first started practicing magic was like, well, this isn't like bad, right? Like kind of having to do that deconditioning of, even though I didn't grow up like very religious, like just living in a country where Catholicism is so societally imprinted on you, just needing to kind of unravel that a little bit for myself. But I didn't feel that it was like a huge hurdle to jump over, but definitely some thoughts that I remember popping up as a teen witch of just like, what if this is like the devil?
Yeah,
Which
that's
I'm like,
awesome.
cool. What's up, Lucifer?
Yeah, you're like, we'll just turn it right around. I love that.
Exactly.
Um, Speaking of deities, no, I love that. When did deity work enter your practice? Do you feel like it's a big part of your practice, first of all? And then if so, when did that sort of like come on the scene?
I definitely feel like it's a huge part of my practice now. I actually was just thinking about that the other day of like how it used to never be a part of my practice and now it's like a huge part of my practice. And it was definitely like more recently than not. I would say maybe like 5 years ago, it started kind of like peaking up, but it didn't become something that was really part of my practice till maybe like 3.5 years ago. I feel
Mm,
like I had like desire to work with deity and like archetypes kind of coming up. But it wasn't like till I found deities that like I kind of stuck with and like still work with now till like maybe 3 years ago.
okay, cool. That's awesome. Um, Sort of as you grew up and maybe your magical practice shifted and changed, what do you feel like your like once you kind of got your bearings in your magical practice, what do you feel like your main like interest was? Or I know you talked a little bit about candle magic, but you can expand upon that, or if there's anything else that you were like, I am super interested in this, or I'm getting huge results by doing this, so I'm like focusing on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I think for a long time, candle magic was a huge part of it. It was like, in a way, I kind of thought like you can't do a spell without a candle, and like now, like I feel like that's something that I learned to kind of like unravel and unpack, and like working with the elements in general, I think is a big part of my practice. But I feel like it was so natural for me to go to candle magic,
Mhm.
that I focus on that a lot. And then definitely altar building. I mean, by trade, I am a designer, and creativity is something that is so just a huge part of my practice and also my life, like in the same way that magic is. And I feel that when you look at your magical practice as a vessel for your creativity, when I started doing that, like things completely changed for me. And being a textile designer in the home market, like gathering antiques and vintage items and curating them into an altar is like just so fun for me. Like I love doing that kind of like styling. And so to be able to interweave that with intention has been something that I feel like has really grown with my style and my creativity throughout the years, and like definitely started with me having a very classic like um book instructed altar of like a glass of water and an incense and a candle and a piece of paper, like very simple and like following rules, to me now just like I like my favorite thing to do in altar building is just like use all these antiques that I have and like create
Mhm.
an environment out of that.
Yeah, that's so cool. Oh, I love that. Yeah, I think that with altar building, um, I feel like sometimes I get questions about altar building, and I get questions of like, why is it even a thing, or what's going on with altar building, or how can I, you know, like what do I build an altar to, or how can I make sure that the altar, you know. almost like the metaphysics of an altar and like how
Mm,
to use an altar, I suppose, right? Like I feel like all these questions or things that I hear, I don't know if your clients ask you those things. I feel like
mhm,
sometimes I don't know what it is about the altar. I think sometimes maybe there's just this, I mean, it's a very popular thing to do, but I feel like sometimes there's almost this mystery around it because of its
mhm.
popularity of, so why are we doing this? Like what is the benefit? So what do you find that for you you use altar building for in your practice?
I like to build an altar. I'm the type of person that like takes down my altar and rebuilds it every time I do a new magical working. So for me, it's like creating the space and the talismans and adornments that go with my ritual and intentionally choosing colors, motifs, designs, offerings that go with that spell. And then I kind of leave that up until I do a new one. And so maybe I'm not like, maybe I feel that that spell is done, but I still kind of like leave that altar setting up until I am going to do a new working. So I feel like it really like sets the stage of the spell and is a part of the ritual in itself for me is to like design it and put it together and kind of get in that headspace and then like standing there and like gazing at the flame and the incense, like it just helps me get into the ritualized state. And it's not something I do for every like spell. Like I guess I would say like what separates maybe like a spell and a ritual for me personally is building an altar. Um and I do have things around my house that I consider like mini altars, but I'm not really a person that has like my ancestor altar and then like my deity altar. Like I have like I guess that's not true. As I say that, I'm like, I do have an altar for Hades that's like always up, and I have like one for Persephone that's like always up, but I don't know. I'm just like not the type of person that I guess like refreshes my altar, like only refreshes my altar, I guess. Like I like create a new setup on my altar every time I do a new spell. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting thinking about like it being this thing that is very popular, but also mystified. And I feel like maybe part of that is that it's kind of specific to witchcraft. Like if you did grow up doing other religious practices, it's like not really something that I feel like is always a part of that. So I think that might be part of like the disconnect for some people is just like, what do I put on it? And then I think also like if you are a beginner, you do have that question of like, tell me what to put on it, right? And it becomes this like question of like, I don't know what to do versus like when you are more of a seasoned witch, you're like, this is a platform for me to kind of play. Um, at least that's how it felt for me.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right about that. Like now I'm like, what what random stuff can I put on my altar? But it's not random. It's like, what can I, yeah, it is like it is playful. It is like,
Mhm.
yeah, like, how can I create this environment? And I think that that's, maybe if I were to sort of explain what the metaphysics of an altar was, how it works, I would definitely say that, yeah, it's like you're creating an environment with objects that all kind of have some type of symbolic meaning, whether
Mhm.
it's meaning just for you or it's sort of like maybe a more universal occult meaning. And all of it together is it's almost like creating like a diorama or something where you're
Yeah.
like, you're creating this environment in which you can cast a spell or do something or place a deity or have sacred space or have a sanctuary. That's cool. Um,
Totally.
yeah, no, I love that you do a lot of very like tactile, grounded, like just the idea of like you being a designer, you working a lot with aesthetic and
Mhm.
you know setting up all, I just think is super cool. Do you feel like there's a part of your practice that is a little bit more happening in like other realms or like the dream realm, or do you feel like it's kind of really rooted into the earth element?
I think there's definitely a part of my practice that is like in like the valleys of my mind. um, and I'm not really like connected to my dreams. It's so funny. I feel like my whole life people are like, you must have the craziest dreams because you know you're psychic and you're a witch. And I'm always like, my dreams are not as I've gotten older, they've gotten more vivid and more interesting, but I still feel like they're not like I know you've talked about like having dreams where you like talk to Hades. Like I never have experiences like that. Like I so wish that I did, but my dream world is not very magical, honestly. My dream world is so mundane. All my dreams are like I'm late to work. It's so annoying. But in my conscious meditative states, like gnosis, I definitely have like different kind of it's funny because like even in my meditation spaces, like there's certain places that I like have in my mind that I go to. So it's funny, it is very like grounded even in even in that space, but there's certainly a part of me that does a lot of mental and just kind of like visualization work. And when I am in ritual, I'll do that after kind of setting the altar, but for if some reason I'm doing something I do a lot of like magic while I'm driving to work, like just like talking to deities or like visualizing things or like setting intention, like all of that kind of mundane work is very often in my mind in kind of like the psychic space for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, and that makes sense because when you're driving, you're like in a trance state, so
Mhm.
you're more receptive and you're able to kind of do that type of communication, do that type of work. So that makes a lot of sense. That's cool.
Totally.
I love that. Um, could you tell us a little bit about how like your divination journey started in terms of like tarot or anything else? Like when did you first start reading tarot or doing divination?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually started doing divination before I started practicing witchcraft.
Oh,
I started reading angel cards at like 14 or something. So I started practicing witchcraft like 16, 17, but I was like reading angel cards from like 13, 14. Like I don't even know where I got them from. I just like had them and I would like do these. I would like invite my friends over and be like, we're having a seance and like do the angel cards for everybody. And they were like, it's so funny because from the moment that I started using any tools of divination, I started getting messages from my intuition and channeling. And for years, like, let's say I started at 14, probably until I was like 20 years old, I was like, I'm not focused. What's these random thoughts? Like, I just didn't have the understanding or the language of like, this is my psychic ability. Um, for so long. And it wasn't until they got so loud that I could not ignore them. Because at this point, sorry, I like jumped a little forward. So like I started like 14 angel cards, but then later on, when I was reading tarot, like when I went to college, I was like 20, 19, 20. um I was like reading tarot for people to like make friends. And I remember like giving someone who's still my friend to this day a reading and getting these intuitive messages so loud that I was like, I cannot ignore this, I just need to say it. And it was like whatever I was saying was like the interpretation of the card, like what I thought the card meant was not resonating with her. And it wasn't until I started to listen to my intuition that the reading started to resonate. And so, but I feel like from the second that I touched these divination tools, like my intuition just started like flooding through. And it took me a long time to trust that and to understand that. And I think that a big part of that is because of like a lot of the stuff I was reading at that time and like learning from was very like witchcraft focused and not necessarily psychic or divination focused. So
yeah.
I started with the angel cards and then I went to Salem for my 18th birthday and I got a Rider Waite tarot deck and I started reading tarot. Oh, I'm sorry. Before that, I had like how Barnes and Noble used to have those like little like intro kits? It was like intro to
Yeah.
tarot. And it was like a crystal tarot deck and like I would read that but like with like I would always look at the book. And so when I went to Salem and I got the Rider Waite tarot, I was like, this is official and I'm gonna like learn how to read it. And I like got really focused on like actually learning tarot and like learning through Rider Waite. And yeah, I was about 18 at the time. And so like within like the year or so is like when I went to college and then started like reading for other people. So I feel like I picked it up pretty quickly. But my psychic abilities and my divination skills really expanded when I started just listening to my own
Mm.
intuition.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love that. I was also a little Barnes and Noble witch. I remember like going to Barnes and Noble, excuse me,
Yes.
with my best friend in high school, and we we would like just sit on the floor in front of like the occult book section, and we would just read everything and put it back on the shelf and then go
Yeah.
home and have our parents pick us up or whatever. I
Honestly,
love
I feel like at the time, like I'm like I thought the selection was like really good in my Barnes and
it.
Noble. It was like a whole section, you know. Which
Mhm.
honestly, I feel like I haven't been to Barnes and Noble in years, which is kind of sad. I love it there, but um, I feel like the last time I was there, it was smaller than it was when I was a kid, and maybe it's just more like
Mhm.
sections now. Maybe it's like more like gotten more nuance than they did before, but I remember one year for it was either Christmas or my birthday, but I pretty much picked out like 7 witchcraft books and was like, Mom, this is what I want for my birthday. This is the only thing I want. And she was like, okay. And that was like all the books I got after the Buckland's Guide. And it was a lot of the like modern witchcraft series. I don't know if you read that one too.
Yeah. I can like picture the cover. Yeah.
Yes, with like the little frame. Yeah. I really liked that one. I felt like that one felt very like I could do this and this is written for me and like this is real for like me and not this like thing that exists outside of like what's capable for me. But I feel like if there was a book that you wish you had when you were a teen witch, what would it be?
Hmm. Oh my goodness. Probably. Hmm. Like, I'm like looking at my
Sorry
bookshelf.
to put you
There's
on
like no,
the
I
spot. No, it's okay.
I love it. I love the question. Such a great question. I sometimes, so I have an answer, but I will preface it by saying that sometimes I have a hard time with books because I feel like the way my brain works is like information is just like swirling around, and I can like take one thing that I find really helpful and link it back to a book, but then there's not maybe like one that I'm like that is my magical worldview. But I would probably say Rebel Witch by Kellyanne Maddox. I love her and I love that book, and I was really into chaos magic. I'm a chaos witch now, but I was really kind of fascinated by chaos magic when I was maybe like late teen, early 20s. And I did luckily watch her YouTube channel, which was available at the time. But I kind of wish that I had the book earlier. I think it came out, I don't know
Totally.
when it came out, but it came out fairly in the last couple of years. And I wish I got it when I was like 14 or 15.
It's so funny. I was going to say that, and then I was like, I feel like you're going to say that, so I'm going to ask you because I know you like, talked about this book before, and I very sadly didn't discover her until like 2 years ago. My partner actually showed her to me, which was like really cute. Because like when we met, like they weren't really into magic, and they were like, I do watch this one witch though; she's really cool. But I got Rebel Witch like knowing that like I know this is probably like more beginner for me, but I got it anyway. And I actually gave it to a friend of mine who was like, I kind of want to start getting into witchcraft. And I'm like, this is the book that I wish I had when I started getting into witchcraft. And yeah, she really demystified chaos magic for me in such a powerful way, which I think is so cool. But yeah, she's just really great in a lot of ways. And I feel like she really embodies like what the belief systems of a witch are in real life, which is something that I really appreciate about her now as like an adult witch that tries to kind of like live with that same integrity.
Yes, I completely agree. I feel like I learned a lot from her in a lot of ways and in my magical practice, and then just I think naturally because I resonate with her worldview in a way around magic, I feel like I just kind of naturally, yeah, like I have the same approach. I have the same like almost like background of like how I want to teach. And so yeah, I feel like all three of us, we should get her on. We should have
Oh
like
my god,
a
that'd be so
part
cool.
two with
I love
Kellyanne. Um that's so funny. That's my dream. But that's awesome. Do you feel like you had friends or anybody in your family that was it could be, when you were younger or even now that you can share learning about the occult with and you can share your practice with. Almost like reminded of this question because my sister introduced chaos magic to me she's older than me, and we were both getting into witchcraft at around the same time. And I remember she was like, "You need to watch Kelly and Maddox. You need to
Mhm.
learn about chaos magic. I feel like it would really resonate with you." Was there anything like that with you where you had, whether it be mentors or friends or anybody that you were kind of like going through the journey of your practice with?
No, I really wish I did. I feel like I was so alone in my journey of becoming a witch. I mean, my friends were like really supportive. Like they were like, "We love that for you and like we'll let you like lead a ritual for us, but like it's not our life." And like that's was like honestly, I feel like the best that I could have asked for at the time.
Yeah.
But nobody was really like on the journey with me. And I wasn't really like an internet kid, so I didn't like talk to any witches online until I like got older. I'm trying to think like when I first started like meeting other witches. I
Mhm.
remember doing a spell to like call in witch friends, and now I feel like I can say like almost all my friends are witches, which is really fucking cool. But I remember there was like a point where I was just like, okay, this is like I'm living in Brooklyn. I know there's other witches out there. I just like need to meet them, and that's when I feel like I started like really growing my like in person community. My and my godmother, actually, she is like new agey spiritual, and she's like into astrology and tarot and stuff. And she's a yoga teacher. And so she kind of like got me into this more like individualized spiritual journey mindset of like spirituality can be something just for you, or like you can find spirituality in different places than just church. So she kind of like gently pushed me into like finding my own thing, which ended up being witchcraft. And she's like down for it, but she's not like a witch herself. She's done like
Yeah.
spells here and there, but I don't think she like identifies as a witch. She identifies as maybe like a mystic or something like that.
Mhm.
um but yeah, I feel like now like there's definitely I'm also just the type of witch that like everybody knows I'm a witch. Like everybody at work knows I'm a witch. Like I am not in the broom closet anywhere.
That's
So I
awesome.
feel like even people who are in my life that aren't like practicing witches like are people that I can talk to about my practice, which is really special and cool. And I feel very lucky to have that.
Amazing. Um, Tell me about, I know we talked a little bit about deity work previously, but I want to hear like what that process was like for you in terms of
Mm.
like who was the first deity you started working with? What was that like? Yeah, just kind of like I would love to just go through that.
Totally. So the first deity I started working with was Lilith. And, you know, I feel like a lot of my early witchcraft journey, like psychologically, was about me finding my own power. Like I came to witchcraft at a time I was like in an abusive relationship, and I was also like a kid. So it was like, you know, I was like finding power in like a lot of ways. And at the time when I started like working with Lilith, or she started like kind of coming up to me, I started like learning about her archetype, and like she started becoming a synchronicity for me. And so I kind of like petitioned her, being like, "Hey, I feel like you're around. Let's connect in like a ritual." And I would say that was like I think I was like 21. I had like just turned 21. Um, and it was like very, my work with Lilith was very dance influenced. Like I would like set this like altar with like a lot of candles, and then just like do this like sexy ritual dance, and like could just like feel like her spirit and her energy, and like feel my own power. And like that was a lot of our relationship. Like I don't really remember her like talking to me. It was just kind of like her archetype, her energy being around, and then me liking that and wanting to invoke that myself, and kind of doing that through the element of fire and like building the fire in my body. um and also like researching her. I think like a lot of my early deity work was just like I feel like there's a synchronicity for me, like this the universe is trying to tell me something about this deity, and then I'm going to dive into that research and find more layers there. But it really wasn't until I started working with Hades that I felt like I could really hear a deity speaking to me in like a very clear and present way. And even though I work with other deity now, like Hades is still like his voice is so clear, and his presence is just so like I just feel his presence so strongly, and it's like there's so much in his presence that I haven't really experienced with any other deity. So I feel like working with him, which from the timeline of working with Lilith to working with Hades was probably like, I guess like 3 years later that I started working with Hades. Yeah, I think I was about 24. And that like really just changed the whole way that I look at deity and my
Mm.
relationship to all deity and kind of like, oh, this is what it can be like, you know?
Yeah, I love that. Hades is so interesting because I find that everyone I talk to that works with Hades has a very similar experience in the sense that like he comes in when if he's right for you, right? Maybe
Yeah.
people who are he's not right for them, this won't happen for, but if he's meant to work with you, it's like no holds barred. He's coming into your life. He's communicating with you in a very clear way. I really am so curious as to why and what that is, and it's sort of like a phenomenon I haven't, maybe it's not meant to be known, but maybe Angelica doesn't need to get to the bottom of it. But
And it's
it's just
interesting though,
insane.
because like he like even like when you think about his like him in like mythology, like he seems so like shy. Like if I were just researching him, had no personal connection to him, I would never think he is the way he is. And I'm sure you feel the same. Like, like he's so like they paint him in this way that he just like does not show up as. And it's so interesting that like of all the gods, he's the one that is like so like kind and loving and present. Like it's so interesting.
Yeah, maybe it's the weird prophecy of his name where like Hades means unseen, and so maybe
Mm.
it's this thing where like yeah, like his true personality is concealed to the world. I don't know. I'm just like no, we're just like
Yeah.
woo.
No, I can totally see that. Or even like because we work with him and like we like because in like the ancient world, right? Like that nobody wanted to say his name. So maybe it's like because we're giving him that like validation that he needs, he's like, I'm like giving you guys love.
Yeah, that's what it used to feel like it was. Like I feel like when I first was trying to put my finger on what this was, why he shows up in such a kind way and in such a different way than yeah what we kind of see in mythology and what we see in his archetype. Yeah, that came up for me where I'm like maybe it's just we're giving him love and he's responding to that, and I think that that's a big part of what it is. And yeah, it is so special. So it's so cool that you work with Hades, and yeah, you kind of had that similar experience that I feel like I just observe in so many Hades devotees, which is awesome. You also
Totally.
were saying that you work with Persephone. Did she
Yeah.
kind of come in later?
She did. When I first started working with Hades, I feel like I did the thing that like a lot of witches do, where I'm like, okay, like I'm gonna like invite Persephone in and see what's up. And at first, it was just like not. It just felt like nothing was really happening, and I was just like, okay, but like I had had experiences at this point when I was trying to work with Persephone. I had had experiences with other deities where they were just like, no, not a match, both on my end and on the deity's end. So it didn't feel like that. It just felt like nothing, it just felt like maybe not now, which is funny because like obviously now we do work together. But um when I started working with Hades, my partner actually started like having all these communications from Persephone. And I started working with Hades like very shortly after me and my partner started dating.
Hmm.
And so it was interesting that like we felt like we were like communicating with both sides of them, like their relationship. And it wasn't until maybe like, I want to say like a couple months later, like it wasn't that much longer. Maybe, yeah, maybe a couple months. That Persephone did start to show up for me. And I think it was just like she communicates so differently than Hades for me. She's so
Hmm.
quiet. She's so like, I don't want to say shy, but like she in a similar way, like Persephone will tell me things, like unlike where Lilith wasn't really telling me any messages, it was just like her essence and her energy.
Hmm.
Persephone will tell me messages, but like she's very like profound and just like one line, like what, like one thing, you know, or like a sentence. And she's very like, she has this like teacher archetype with me where she like gives
Mm,
me this like wisdom and this guidance. And she's very, very wise. And she's like, she's a woman of few words. And it's so different from me. So it's very interesting to communicate with her like that. But yeah, I feel her a lot, but I don't hear from her as often as I do from Hades.
yeah, that's awesome. Um, I find that Persephone, like sometimes I describe it as she feels like a bird on a branch outside my window when she's talking to me.
Mm.
Like it's there's a little bit of a like a layer of separation where like she's there, I can feel, I can see, I can hear the tweeting of the bird, but it's very like yeah, it's very delicate. It's very
Yes.
simple. It's yeah, poetic, like you were saying, concise. And then Hades is just like I feel like I'm on like speakerphone with like somebody. Like,
Totally. Yeah.
like
I
he's just like, hi. Yeah.
definitely. I think also like my relationship with Persephone got a lot better when I stopped trying to have the relationship between the two of them at the same time. I was just kind of like, okay, my relationship with Hades is my relationship with Hades, and like I need to give Persephone kind of like the space that she needs to take up. And I feel like there are certain things that I can do to like anytime I water my plants, I'm like, this is a time where I'm like open to messages from her. And there's like certain ways in which I feel like I can go to her and like invoke her presence and ask her to connect with me. Whereas Hades will kind of like just swoop in on his own sometimes.
Mhm.
And she will too, but I feel like more often I'm like, she really likes to talk to me when I'm by nature. And I think it's also her way of just telling me to like be by nature more, which I do need.
Yeah. Yeah, because you live in the city, right? So you're
Yeah.
like, I love that.
There's actually this church at the end of my block with a huge bush of datura. And so I'll go and like sit in front of the datura bush. It's so cool and like spooky that it's like at the church, but I'm like,
Yeah.
you guys know what's here, but I'll go and
Oh
like
my
sit
God.
in front of that and like talk to her sometimes. And that's really special. And that's like right on the corner of my block, which is very cool.
That's awesome. Oh,
Yeah.
I love that, right? You're like, oh, do you guys know
I
it's like a very
know.
poisonous flower outside of your church? I love that. So when it comes to like your practice now and your mentorship and how you kind of moved into a teaching role and your tarot reader, like how you kind of took your divination practice into a professional sphere, what do you feel like that move into being a like a professional witch looked like for you? What was that like?
Hmm. That's interesting to think about. I feel like it kind of just happened, but obviously it didn't. You know, it was like there was an intention behind it. But when I look back on it, I'm like, oh, it kind of just like, I think it was like when around the same time that I had kind of done that spell to call in more witches in my life, I was around a lot of people who were very interested in witchcraft. And I felt like because at that point I had been practicing for like maybe 5 or 6 years already, like I felt like anyone I was talking to about magic, like I was teaching in a way. And
Mm,
so I had like a couple of friends that I was kind of like getting into these conversations that felt like mentorship with. And also at the same time, I started like reading tarot for clients. And I feel like that brought out this mentor kind of archetype in me. Um, and then I started like I really wanted to, and I think this comes from like my desire to like build community that I didn't have in my practice. Like I really wanted to lead ritual and like find ways to like do events and like lead ritual. And I think that's what got me into this kind of like leadership role in like my community of witches and just starting to build this kind of like business for myself.
mhm.
And then after doing that and like kind of creating these spaces for a while, I used to run this market called Witch World, where I would like get all these like witchy vendors and kind of just like create like a night market where there was like music and I would read tarot and like read like lead like a little ritual and have like my friend do energy healing, and like people, like other witches I knew, like selling their like creations. And it was at the time I was making like a lot of oils and products and stuff. So I would sell stuff, and I started really meeting a lot of people very interested in magic through that experience, and like feeling this like energy of like building a magical community around me. And then I think shortly after that, I just started like doing that online more and like building up this space. And then I feel like after reading tarot for maybe like 3 or 4 years, and like I started teaching tarot, I guess that's also part of like me kind of stepping into a mentorship role. Is like at a certain point I was like, I
Mhm.
feel like I should teach tarot. Like people were asking me to teach them tarot, and I was like, I should like make a class. And that was like kind of the first like long form class that I taught. And then shortly after that I was like, I kind of want to like do magical mentoring. Like what does that look like? And I just kind of like came up with this like loose idea for a program, and then it like became its own thing. But yeah, I just was like, I felt like the universe was kind of like affirming to me that I had this like knowledge that people wanted me to share, and then I found a way to like cultivate that into something that I could offer to people.
Yeah, I love that. That makes so much sense. Yeah, it's just like a really natural unfolding of
Yeah.
your knowledge. I love that. That's amazing. Um, in terms of like your tarot, your professional like tarot reading practice, I know you like do a lot of like in-person readings. Is that correct? Like kind of like
You
around,
know,
not really
I
much anymore, maybe, but
I do, and I don't. Like, I feel like
okay.
like my friend owns this like kava bar that I read tarot at like quite often, and then I do online stuff too. But I feel like
Mhm.
different times in my life it kind of ebbs and flows. But yeah, I yes.
A little bit. And it can be online too, but I'm just curious if like there was an experience that you had that you'd want to share in terms of like something that really marked your tarot, like your professional tarot practice, whether it be like a synchronicity or a story or something interesting, or even just like meeting a client in an interesting way. Does anything kind of come up when you think of like a story that kind of encapsulates that journey?
Hmm, that's interesting to think about. I think like I feel like what I think is coming up for me, like thinking about this, is that
Mhm.
like throughout the process of me reading tarot for people and my witchcraft practice growing, I've like learned and cultivated ways to like make my readings more magical.
Mm.
And I feel like for a while I was just kind of like having like my like specialty readings, like just online for people who like knew me as this witch. But then when I was in person, I was just like, okay, I'm just doing like, love reading, general reading. And I feel like the more that I've just let myself and my interest in my practice grow with who I am as a reader or a mentor, the better and the richer the experience has become for me and my clients. It's like I have this one reading that I call Divining with Deities, and it's kind of like a communication with deities, just kind of like who's coming through for this client. And I started doing that at like in-person events, thinking I just like put it on like my menu, and I was just like, no one's gonna do this. Like, but if they do, that'd be cool. And I feel like those readings have been so special, and like just people who like I don't like, complete strangers or people who I do know from community, but like I don't know anything about them as like a magical practitioner. Like that reading has really like built like this sense of like growth in my practice as a reader, but also like it's kind of like a mixture of magical mentorship and tarot in that reading.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
like getting to connect with people on that level, and like hearing like all these people just like around me, like knowing like that the gods are talking to them too. I'm like, that's so cool. And like, it feels like, you know, we start talking about me being like, I don't have anyone in my life that like has any magical interest, to now just like strangers that I'm reading tarot for being like, yeah, I talk to the gods, like for sure. And like, it's just been like a really cool kind of marker of the growth that I've had in my practice and the people who I've attracted around me while doing that.
Yeah. I love that. That's awesome. That's so cool that that reading was able to touch so many people and Yeah, I love that. I know I'm always surprised too. Every once in a while, I used to read a lot in person, and now I don't do it as much anymore. And yeah, I'm always interested to hear what we're going to talk about because it is typically so much different
Yeah.
than an online clientele, which yeah is more specialized. They probably know you or know your a little bit about your story. So when it comes to the work that you do now, is there any program or offering that you're really excited about, and how can people find you and work with you?
Yeah. Well, I feel like I'm always excited about my magical mentor offerings. I actually, like, maybe a couple of months ago, kind of curated this new program called Waking the Witch. And it's a 7-week program that kind of goes through the 7 traditional planets and like focuses on growing magic associated with that. And we kind of like look at things in the birth chart, and we work with tarot and like find ways to like look at ways that maybe you connect with that planet specifically and how that can dictate that part of magic for you. Like for Saturn, we like kind of sit down and do like some magical boundaries of like things that you're like not trying to look at, or ways in which you want to like create a safer space for yourself as you're like maybe exploring talking to spirits, and then like how like your natal Saturn can like strengthen that. So that's something that I'm really excited about and put like a lot of love and labor into curating, which has been really fun. And then I have my like monthly Patreon where I do like a class every month, and that's completely different depending on the month. Like a lot of times I'll do it based on if there's any kind of like witchy holiday that I'm celebrating or astrological event that I think is really important, that I want to kind of like host a ritual around. But that kind of like rotates between teaching, ritual. Sometimes we do crafts. This month we're like doing a craft.
Fun.
So that's really cool. And yeah, I feel like those are like two of my offerings that I'm really excited about now.
Awesome. I love it. What's your Instagram and where can people find those offerings?
My Instagram is at weaving.witch, and you can find the offerings linked in my Instagram bio and on my website, which is emmawitchbrook.com.
I love that. I love that that's your like I love that your last name is Westbrook, but you go with Witchbrook. It's so good. It's
My
amazing.
friend's older brother started calling me Emma Witchbrook to tease me, and I have reclaimed it for my business.
I love it. I remember like I don't know what it was. I feel like I like saw your username change one day or something because we're like mutuals, and I remember like
Yes.
I was like that is genius. Like, I love that.
It's like I made my like Instagram Emma Witchbrook, and then like I was so sure about it, and then like I don't know, I just was like people know me as Weaving Witch, and like there's like this part of me that is, I feel like it's like the parts of me that like are battling is like be a full-time witch, be a textile witch, like
Yeah.
like playing
Yeah.
out in real time. But yeah, so I felt
But
like the
yeah.
website is Emma
Mhm.
Witchbrook, and then my Instagram
Yes.
is Weaving Witch, to have
Okay,
both
cool.
both of the me's be happy.
I love that. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. So website and then Instagram handle. I love it.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today about your practice. I really, really appreciate it.
Yes,
And
thank you so much.
yeah,
This was so much fun. Thank you for having me.
yes. Yeah, it was awesome. I hope everybody goes and checks out Emma's links. Everything's in the show notes. And thanks for tuning in to the Diaries of a Witch podcast. We'll talk very soon. Bye.